Hello, and welcome in to another episode of The Collectors. Thank you so much for being here. I'm your host, Chad Starbuck, and I think we've got a really fun show for you today. But before we get started, just a couple of things. If you haven't done so already, be sure and hit that subscribe button down below. And if you like the show today, also hit that like button and share it out with your friends and family. That really helps a lot, those likes, so they are certainly appreciated. Now, like I said, I think we've got a really fun show for you today, but before we get started, I'd like to tell you a quick little story about one of my biggest and probably one of my best finds that I've had when I've been out on the road. And it happened probably about 3 to 4 years ago. I happened to be traveling for business for my day job, and I was driving back to the airport in Kansas. And I was pretty close to the town of Lawrence, Kansas, so I pulled into Lawrence, Kansas, and I headed down to Main Street. I'm pretty familiar with Lawrence, having grown up in Kansas. Now, downtown Lawrence, Kansas is your pretty traditional downtown, lined up on both sides with shops with big windows to be able to display items. So I pulled right into downtown, and I actually pulled right into this stall, and right in front of me was this shop, Shark's Surf Shop. I know, pretty ironic for downtown Lawrence, Kansas. But right there in the window was a motorcycle. And I got out of my car, headed right into the shop, and kind of took a look at the motorcycle, and kind of looked around the shop as well. I happened to talk to one of the employees and asked if the owner was around, and he was. So I chatted with him a little bit about his motorcycle in the window. It was a Honda CB160 from 1964. And it was just the coolest motorcycle. A really cool silver gas tank, was in excellent condition. So I chatted with him for a little bit, asked him where he'd got it, and he said that it had sat in a guy's den for the past 35 years, and he'd only picked it up about a year ago. So like I said, I was very interested in it. We chatted a little bit. I asked him if he'd be interested in selling it, and he said, hadn't really thought about it, but he might be. So we actually agreed on a price. And I just bought myself out of the window of Shark's Surf Shop in Lawrence, Kansas, a 1964 Honda CB160. One of the coolest bikes that I've ever seen. It's not a very valuable bike, but it just has a little coolness about it. So that was one of my best and my biggest picks that I've had when I've been out on the road. Now let's go ahead and jump into our show today. My guest today is Denise Madren. Now Denise got started at a pretty young age, picking and collecting back in Ohio with her mother and her brothers. Now today she's settled into a really fantastic array of items that she sells right here in Utah and across the country. Let's go ahead and join our conversation with Denise Madren. Hello, Denise. Welcome into The Collectors. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Hey, Chad. Thanks for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
That's great. I love the background.
Thank you.
You've got a lot of cool stuff right behind you there today.
Right. I consider myself a collector of collections.
There you go. And I guess kind of speaking of that, I mean, you kind of were indoctrinated into collecting at a very young age, weren't you?
Yes. My earliest memory was of my mom. My mom's a crafter.
Okay.
And it didn't matter. Whatever craft you can think of, whatever medium you can think of, my mom did it, used it. And a lot of what she did, she has ingrained in me, and she is actually she molded me, and I attribute everything that I'm doing right now to her. So when I was about 10 years old, she would assign my brothers, I have 3 brothers, and me collections. She was like Oprah Winfrey.
You didn't get to pick?
No, we didn't get to pick, but we did have a lot of overlapping collections. So she's just like Oprah Winfrey, just like, you're collecting stamps, you're collecting matchbooks, you're collecting thimbles, you're collecting baseball cards, stickers, paper dolls, mobiles. And I was a very, very organized collector because of her as well. She set us up with the books and everything to track, our own collections. We had at least 3 to 5 collections each. And it was insane. And honestly, what makes me really sad is I don't know where any of those collections are today.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah. But she gave me the bug.
Yeah, she definitely gave you the start. I think you grew up in Ohio, is that right?
Yes, out of Cleveland.
Now, I would imagine, I mean, I just kind of knowing the Midwest a little bit, I grew up in Kansas. I mean, as far as, estate sales and antique stores and things like that, flea markets and such, it's quite good, right?
Oh, yes. Ohio is great. My mom actually has a store in Pennsylvania. And so that area as well is just great for antiquing and thrifting.
Now, going from collecting as a child into adulthood, kind of what was the item, or what were the things that kind of got you started collecting as an adult?
Well, when I was in my 20s, I was in the Air Force.
Okay.
I had just gotten out of the Air Force and I was moving to Utah. And I remember I was at a flea market with my mom, and she pulls me aside and she's like, "Hey, listen, so I've assigned your brother another collection." My brother's in his 30s, I'm 25.
Okay.
And she's like, "I just want to show you, these are insulators and your brother is going to start collecting them." And you're just like, does he know that he's going to start collecting? Anyway, so on your travels across the country, I want you to find your brother insulators. Well, I'm thinking that's like the unicorn item. I'm never going to see an insulator. What's an insulator? I don't. And pretty much for the next 25 years, I've been collecting insulators for my brother, but he's never received them because they're just so heavy. Like, you can't ship those, I mean, you can, but who has the money in their 20s to ship, 5, 10, 15 insulators to anybody across the country? And not I. And at this point now, I have about 150 to 200 insulators.
Wow.
Some from other countries.
Okay.
I have some from Russia, one from Australia, some from the UK, and they're glass, porcelain. I have some porcelain ones right here.
Oh,
This one's actually blue. And I have some rubber ones.
Okay.
Plastic.
Wow.
I didn't even know they made these in plastic, so I kind of freaked out when I saw this. And like a carbon material. If you ever find them with the wire still on, leave that on. That's pretty cool. Okay. And then up here I have some of the colored ones that are really cool. So the collection that I have is actually 150 to 200 different insulators.
Oh, wow.
So there are over 9,000 different models.
That's
and
incredible.
There's actually a price guide too, so you can look up the prices and that kind of thing.
For those in our audience that maybe don't know exactly what an insulator is, what can you describe them?
Okay, so in the 1800s, late 1800s, when the telegraph was invented, they started, raising poles for telegraph, and they needed something to insulate between the electricity and the wood pole so the pole wouldn't catch on fire. So a lot of people think that's where the insulators actually came from, but honestly, they were actually put on houses.
Oh, okay.
And the reason they were put on the house is to insulate your home from lightning strikes.
Okay.
So your house wouldn't catch on fire.
Yeah.
So, and I think that was in the late 1700s. And then in the late 1800s, the telegraph, and now it's the telephone poles, and then the electrical poles. And then in the 1960s, that's when like the porcelain started. And that's mainly what you see today on those big poles, and they're humongous.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting. I'm not as passionate, after 25 years of collecting. My insulator collection, I'm not as passionate as most. So those guys there's a National Insulator Association.
Sure.
There's people who've been collecting since the 70s. And there's all kinds of Facebook groups that you can join. Facebook, whether it's glass, porcelain, whether you like the beehive, which is this one right here because it looks like a beehive.
Right.
They have insulator and pet pages, so you can take pictures of your pets with your insulators. Squirrels out in the yard. Some people keep their collection outside, but my collection is nothing compared to some of these diehard collectors, and they always give me a hard time. I finally broke down and bought a price guide, and it comes with an app.
Oh my goodness.
And because I would ask them all the time when I'm in a shop, I'd take a picture and post it to the group and say, "Hey, it's $50. Is this worth $50?" And they'd be like, "Would you just get a price guide, lady?" And I'm like, I know, but you guys it's fast. I get immediate response, But a couple of years ago, I finally broke down and bought a price guide. So it's a good thing to have.
In a sense, your collection of 150 plus insulators is not even yours.
Not mine. If my brother ever showed up with a U-Haul,
he could take them.
Yeah, he could take them. They're hard to display once you start getting into, that many. Initially, I had them around my house. And then eventually I made shelves in my garage. So I do have a workshop in my garage. And so now I have shelves for them. And it's a pretty large collection. They're hard to keep clean when they're out in the garage. They're really pretty in windows. They're a great collection for a kid to start. It's cheap.
Okay.
It can be cheap, 50 cents to $10 for just like the standard insulators. And then, there's auction pages as well in Facebook, and you can get up to the $8,000 to $12,000 range.
Oh, wow.
I don't have any of those.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool, and that's a pretty cool story of kind of how you got started and choosing those items. But you've kind of described yourself as a collector of collections, right?
Yes.
So from insulators to what are you passionate about?
Well, when I got married, and about 10 years ago, my husband and we built a house, and I wanted to do something totally different in my home. I wanted to have more character. And so I'm very much now into vintage. And so I think I'm a collector. I would consider like a collector of the eye. Like it has to look good. And so I would have a space in my home that I wanted to do something with.
Yep.
And that's how the collection would actually start. So right behind me, you see some cubbies. I found these cubbies at a little market, like a vintage market.
Yep.
And it wasn't my intention when I bought them to go, hey, I'm going to collect clocks. But I had a clock, I put it in there, and I thought the contrast of the light cupboards with the light cubbies with the dark clock looked really cool. So now I collect black clocks. And that's how that started. And all my collections, I have a dozen collections that I have going right now. And that's the Insulators, ironstone collection, including like chamber pots, also known as thunder mugs. I collect cake stands, clocks, military yard longs, marmalade and advertising jars from the UK, shoe horns, toy dogs, the toy squeakers, jars of stuff, jars just full of things like, old wheels, clothespins.
Yep.
Cork, bottle caps, dominoes, whatever you can stick in a jar. Right now, I'm working on a collection right now. It's I got shoehorns in my jar, but this one is only half full. And what's in it is measuring tapes, like sewing measuring tapes.
Right. Yeah.
And you just roll them up into a ball and you put them in a jar. But again, most of my collections, it's just something nice to look at. So once I fill a space, I go from like collect, to I slow down, and then I get really very picky about what I buy. Right. So like if I see a clock, it has to be something I don't have, and be really cool looking to put, and then I'd probably replace it with one, and then I'd get rid of the other. So, but I have a dozen collections going.
Dozen different collections. Right, and you kind of, that kind of makes me think that maybe when you have completed your collection, at least in your mind, it's ready to move on to the next. Is that right?
Yes, sometimes that is what happens. I find that selling is probably the easiest way of getting rid of what I don't want, or kind of, sparsing out some of my collections to, make room for better pieces.
Right. Mm-hmm. Now, I think you're a buyer, a seller, and a collector, right?
Yes, I am definitely a buyer, seller, collector.
Like when you're going out and you're going to estate sales and things like that, how do you kind of prepare yourself for going out?
Well, so when I decide that I'm gonna go shopping for the day, I keep a list of things that I'm looking for on my phone. And the reason I do that, because I collect such a wide variety of things, and I also upcycle vintage. And if I'm looking for something in particular, so if I want to make a wreath and out of a buggy wheel, I make sure that I read this list prior to going into anywhere, whether it's a market or an estate sale, and just kind of like refresh and review what I want, because you go in there and it's so overwhelming. There's so many people and there's just so much going on, especially at markets. People are grabbing. It's like Black Friday shopping, you know, people are trying to grab stuff and you're just like, So it's really good to have a list of what you're looking for. It doesn't mean that you're not going to see something that just wows you and you're not going to, you know, that you just absolutely must have. Those are givens, right? But this list will help focus. And so I'm one of those people that I'm very like, I have an undiagnosed attention deficit disorder. So I am all over the place and it really takes me time to like have to really slow down and focus. So I take a list. I take a shopping cart. I actually take a shopping cart to estate sales as well. Make sure your name or your business card is taped to it so that somebody doesn't think it's part of the sale and walk off with it. But I keep it outside. I'm usually between the garage and the house. And I take a flashlight, I take a mask, and I take gloves. Because you never know what you're going to walk into. You can go into someone's garage, their basement, and it's a hoarder house. And I have really bad allergies. So when I say take a mask, pre-COVID, take a mask, because you get down there and you start moving stuff around and my whole face would like swell up. So I definitely needed a mask. And if you got one of those little headlamps, those are awesome too, because then your hands are free. Your hands are free to dig. So I take extra bags. And then most importantly, I take my business cards. So if you're not a business and if you're just a diehard collector, I would suggest that you get on Vistaprint and just do a business card for $9.99. They do a box of business cards and they just do your name. And then if you're looking for something in particular, you could put that on there as well with your contact information, because network all the time, even as estate sale companies and at markets with vendors and shops. Like they'll keep you in the forefront of their mind. When they find something, they're going to contact you because they want to sell it. And if you're willing to buy, they're going to contact you. And that's, I have networked my little heart out, and I have a lot of people that contact me. I mean, I have a ton of different collections. So I do have people contacting me all the time saying, hey, I found some insulators. Hey, I found some wagon wheels for you to make wreaths out of.
Well, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So those, I mean, I'm sure people brought this up before, but I think the two big things that I haven't heard yet is review a list of things that you're looking for, and then also business cards, network while you're out.
Yeah, definitely network. And that, I think it's a nice thing just about the kind of the vintage community or the estate sale and flea market community. If you get to know the other people, not only do you want to get to know the people running the estate sale, but you want to, you know, you usually see a lot of the same people a lot of the times at the sales. So get to know them, and everybody can kind of help each other out. Right. Yeah, it's a great community.
It is. It's so wonderful to have people with like-minded, you know, that are like-minded and like soulmates or, you know, kindred spirits of the same, who get you, because there are a lot of people who be like, oh my God, you know, somebody died and that's their, you know, like that's stuff from dead people. And you're just like, but it's cool. There's history there, you know, it's fascinating. They don't get it.
No. Yeah. They
just don't get it.
I mean, a lot of times you go into estate sales and, you know, you are going into somebody's home and they have possibly just passed away. And there is a group of people that really go for the home goods. I mean, they're going for, you know, they're going for food or for cleaning supplies and things like that. You definitely see that crowd, but then you also see, you know, the crowd that we're more familiar with that are going.
It's a very somber experience too, you know. But I've also been at living estates where you didn't know that the person was alive and they kind of sneak up behind you and start having a conversation with you. That is odd, you know. So you're always trying to be respectful, and then, you know, expect the unexpected.
Yeah, exactly. Well, going from dead people stuff, why don't we jump into, I think, another item that I see, squeaker dogs. I really don't know much about squeaker dogs.
Yeah.
How did you get into these and what are they?
So the squeaker dogs, how did I get into them? So we moved into a new house. My dogs spend the night in our mudroom / laundry room.
Okay.
So that's kind of like their house. And I am not much of a like kitschy collector.
Yeah.
So this would be my kitschy collection. Okay. So everything else is more manly and industrial. But my kitschy collection is my dog collection, and it goes in the dog's room. So essentially what it is they are children's toys.
Okay.
Children's toys that squeak. And they are molded from rubber, and there's every kind of shape and size possible. I happen to collect the dogs, but you can get every animal you can think of: giraffes, elephants, ducks, lambs. There's all different kinds of kitties, and then also little kids. There's children. Okay. So there are collectors out there who have 1,000 of these. I personally, once again, have to limit my space. I have a space, I have an area. So, I'm going to stick to just collecting dogs. It's very, very hard, because when you see a cute kitty that squeaks, or a tiger, and you squeak it, and you're like, you want to take it home. But I really have to say, okay, stop, crazy lady, just don't do it, and just stick to the dogs. So the dogs are actually from like the 1950s, 1960s, made by rubber companies like Arrow Rubber Company. Edward Mobley's one of the artists. And when I'm looking for a squeaker dog, some of my rules are, he can't have any cracks or dried rubber. And also he must squeak. He or she must squeak. So some of the cool ones I found, this one right here.
Oh yeah.
With the little dog so you can see a size difference. Okay. Yep. There is definitely a size difference. So he's really cute, and he's got like a metal squeak versus the plastic. So this one's older. And then this one I found off of Etsy. Okay. Yeah. I made a huge mistake. When I got this, it had a plastic or rubber piece with an elastic on it, and I didn't understand what that was, so I cut it off.
No.
This is a bottle squeak. So what this was is the elastic would actually go around the bottle, the baby bottle.
Oh, okay? Yeah.
And it would sit, and he squeaks, and it would sit on top of the bottle and stare at the baby, which is kind of creepy, right?
It is a little creepy.
It is a bit creepy, but he's super cool. I also found this one. It's a pink poodle. She's only about 4 inches. She was super high up on a shelf in an antique mall. And I thought for sure she was ceramic, because I've never seen one this small. But when I grabbed her and I was squeaking her up and down the aisles. People thought I was insane, because I was so excited when I found her. And then, because I collect everything under the sun, I'm from Cleveland, and I'm a huge baseball fan. Okay. I found this one in Utah, and I just couldn't believe it. You see what that is? So this is actually Chief Wahoo.
Yep.
Controversial. They don't call the Cleveland Indians anymore. Yep. So Chief Wahoo, and he squeaks. He's lost a lot of his paint, but when I saw him, I grabbed him and held him to my heart, and ran out of that store as fast as I could. But this is the only squeak outside of my dog squeaks.
Out of the dog.
Yeah.
Now, do the squeaker to the dogs? I mean, is there much value in them, and is there a price range or what you can find them at?
So the big dogs, you can find them anywhere from $25 to $35 each. So it's not, super expensive. Yeah. I actually have sold one. I had a duplicate. So I do have a duplicate here. I have a brown one and a black one, but they're different colors, and that's why I kept them. But the very first one I got was this one right here. This is an Edward Mobley. And I actually found a duplicate of him. And then that's when I was like, you know what, we need to have some control, and we need to stick to our space and only keep one of each. Right. So I think in some point, if I find some more, one of these will go, this one's really pretty. The poodle. Yep. She's super pretty.
They're quite large.
Yeah, they're very large. And so a lot of people think squeaker dog toys. Yeah. They think dog toys.
Yeah.
These are children's toys.
Yeah.
So my granddaughter comes over, she's 2, and she is just like, Grandma, squeaker toys. I let her play with this one and she actually cracked it. So there'll be no more playing with Grandma's squeaker toys.
No more.
Yeah.
Well, kind of going, from squeaker toys, you got clocks behind you that you've been collecting. What else are you really into right now?
I am, my husband and I, Papa Pelican is what I call him. He just finished our basement about 2 years ago.
Okay.
So he was going on and on about how that was going to be the man cave. That's the really trendy, popular thing right now. The basement is actually our entertaining area. Sure. For family, friends. So we have a bar down there, and then we have a big open section for watching football games and whatnot. So when I was designing and coming up with ideas for how to decorate the basement, that's when I really kind of honed in on like late 1800s, early 1900s, and which I like to call the Henry Ford era. Okay. Industrial. He was the chief developer of like the assembly line technique and mass producing. And so, the Model T and whatnot. And so like black, I like black, metal, and then advertising. So the basement is really kind of cool. And so I've been focusing on barware. So seltzer bottles. Sure. And then also I have a gallery wall in the basement that's really focused on beer. My husband loves to fish, so bass. And that wall is all black and white. There's marquee letters that spell out bar. And so I've really been like looking for items to like fit into a gallery wall. And I wanted it tightly placed. So old signs, the fishing tackle, they're metal. The fishing tackle that you would put on your belt. Yeah. I found a few different models of those. So those are on a little shelf down there. And so that's really anything manly and industrial, grungy, dirty, advertising crates. Yep. So I'm like all over the place.
No, that's really cool. I mean, and especially I guess, you're kind of collecting for him in a sense of, helping him fill out his man cave.
Yes.
Some of the items that you have aren't, just like you said, they aren't necessarily something that a woman might normally collect.
Oh yes, definitely. Even when I was in my 20s and I had my Insulator collection, I was single and dating, and it was always a great conversation starter to tell, a date that I collected insulators because it was very manly. Like a lot of the linemen from the 70s were the ones who actually started collecting their own telephone pole insulators. And it was a magnet because I didn't collect dolls or teacups. I collected insulators, which was really cool. And I've always been into more of a manly look, like architectural salvage. Sure. And then the metal, the industrial. And
is there anything else that you want to touch on today as far as items that you like? And
yeah, I have a few unique items that I'd love to share with you real quick. The clock collection, my favorite clock, is actually from World War I. So the federal government would have companies, manufacturers, they had to scale back on their use of metals. Right. Yeah. So the clock company came up with this idea to use a paper mache for the body of a clock. So this is actually called a war alarm.
Oh, wow.
So this clock is really cool, and it's one of my favorite in my collection.
Yeah, I haven't seen one of those before.
Yeah, and the other thing that I really love is I have a scrapbook from 1896 to 1903. Okay. And I love the color of it. But this girl, she would go to the theater, and then she would scrapbook, and she would post the program and any pictures. And she was like she would give her reviews of each one and write in the side.
Oh, fantastic.
One of my favorite reviews that she said was her and her friends had a great time, and they laughed and hissed and some other things. So, back then when the villain would come onto the stage, they would hiss and boo at the villain. And so this book is chock full of the programs, vaudeville acts, orchestras, and theaters and the plays. And I'm really passionate about that book. I also have another book It didn't look like much on the front, but the inscription. So always look, when you're looking at books, look to see if there's an inscription.
Yeah.
But this was to Frank from Howard, Margaret, and Janet, December 25th, 1938. So that was Christmas, 1938.
Yep.
And then someone came back later and wrote that this book belonged to Frank Orme and was very precious. He was killed at the age of 19, World War II, Normandy.
Wow.
Rear gunner in the U.S. Army, Air Force, taken prisoner, and all prisoners were killed by the Nazis as the Allies stormed the beach on D-Day.
Wow.
So you would never think it's an atlas to look and see that. And so I do have a room with all my yard longs that are all military yard longs, and that book is in there. While I was on the hunt for my yard longs too, I found this one, and this is they call it a living photograph.
Yeah.
And a patriotic living photograph.
Yep.
And this is of the of a Navy battalion, or not a battalion, but the seamen. And the seamen actually would line up into the shape. So in this one, in this case, it was the shape of a flag. And so I found that, and it's was taken in San Francisco. So that's pretty cool.
I just I really love his yard longs as well, and I've only really started to get into them very recently, and I think the stories that are behind them are just incredible, and the same as the book that you found as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, just to know the kind of the history of the person that owned that is just incredible.
Yes, the history, that's probably one of the biggest things that I love about collecting vintage. One of the yard longs I have is like from 1909. It was taken in France, but it's of American soldiers, and it's in front of an old chateau, and it's just amazing to look at. And if you're interested in searching for yard longs, I would just be very careful, because read the description. Yep. People are selling reproductions. Yeah. And so if you want the original photograph, just make sure that you read the details and everything. You can also get it framed yourself. So I have framed some of my own. So if you're only able to get the actual photo, don't be afraid. There's places on Etsy and whatnot that can make a frame for you. Great. So, just get out there and collect them. Yeah,
they're really cool. Denise, it's been a pleasure having you on today. Before we go, I want to make sure that people know how to get in touch with you. What is the best way?
The Vintage Pelican. So the Vintage Pelican is on Instagram. That is my main social media place where you would go to find me. I'm also on Facebook and as the Vintage Pelican, and then I'm on Etsy, but it is the Vintage Pelican 1. Yes.
There must be another Vintage Pelican out there, possibly.
Yes, and they're not active, which is sad.
Oh, that's too bad. Well, Denise, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. You have a great eye for different types of collecting. So thank you so much for being on.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.
All right. Take care and keep collecting.
I will.
All right. See ya. Well, there you have it. That was a really fun show. And I wanted to be sure and thank my guest today, Denise Madren of the Vintage Pelican. Now, Denise kind of describes herself as the collector of collections, and I think that is certainly the case. She has got quite a array of different items that she collects, from clocks to her squeaky dogs to insulators as well. So it was a pleasure having her on the show today. And I want to be sure and thank you guys as well. Thank you so much for watching. It's always a pleasure to have you guys here with me as well. Be sure and hit that subscribe button down below. Be sure and hit those likes. Again, those likes are really important. They help keep this thing going. And be sure and share this out with your friends and your family. And then join us next time on The Collectors as we travel the country in search of another unique collector and collection. Take care and keep collecting.